Marion and Perrine Le Pen, known as Marine Le Pen, is a French lawyer and politician. She is the president of the National Front, FN, a political party in France. She is the youngest daughter of longtime FN leader Jean-Marie Le Pen and the aunt of FN MP Marion, Maréchal-Le Pen. Le Pen joined the National Front in 1986 and has been elected as a regional councillor, a member of European Parliament, and a municipal councillor in Hénin-Beaumont. She was a candidate for the leadership of the FN in 2011 and won with 65% of the vote, defeating her opponent Bruno Gollnisch and succeeding her father Jean-Marie Le Pen, president of the party for nearly 40 years. She then became the second president of the party. In 2012, she placed third in the presidential election with 90% of the vote, behind François Hollande and Nicolas Sarkozy. She launched a second presidential bid for the upcoming election, scheduled for April 2017. Described as more democratic and Republican than her nationalist father, Le Pen has led a movement of the demonization of the Front National to detoxify and soften its image, based on renovated positions and renewed teams, also expelling controversial members accused of racism, anti-Semitism, or opportunism. She finally expelled her father from the party on the 20th of August 2015 after new controversial statements. She has also relaxed some political positions of the party, advocating for civil unions for same-sex couples instead of her party's previous opposition to legal recognition of same-sex partnerships, accepting unconditional abortion and withdrawing the death penalty from her platform. Le Pen was ranked among the most influential people in 2011 and 2015 by the Time 100. In 2016, she was ranked the second most influential MEP in the European Parliament by Politico, just behind the President of the European Parliament Martin Schulz. Early life. Childhood. Marion Anne Perrine Le Pen was born on the 5th of August 1968 in Neuilly-sur-Seine. She is the youngest of the three daughters of Jean-Marie Le Pen, a Breton politician and a former paratrooper, with his first wife Pierrette Léon. She was baptized the 25th of April 1969 at La Madeleine by Father Popat. Her godfather was Henri Botti, a relative of her father. She has two sisters, Jan and Marie-Caroline. In 1976, Marine survived a bomb attack on the family as they slept in their beds. Private life. Le Pen was raised Roman Catholic. After her divorce from François in 2000, she married Éric Loriot in 2002, the former National Secretary of the National Front and a former advisor to the regional election in Nord-Pas-de-Calais, whom she also divorced in 2006. Since 2009, she has been in a relationship with Louis Elliott. He was the National Front General Secretary from 2005 to 2010, then the National Front Vice President who was in charge of the project. Early political career. First steps and rise within the FN, 1986 to 2010. In 1986, at the age of 18, Marine Le Pen joined the FN. In 2000, she became president of Generations Le Pen, a loose association close to the party aimed at demonizing the Front National. In 1998, she joined the FN's juridical branch, which she led until 2003. In 2000, she joined the FN Executive Committee, Bureau Politique. In 2003, she became vice president of the FN. In 1998, she acquired her first political mandate when she was elected regional councillor in the Nord-Pas-de-Calais. From 2002, she began to establish her parliamentary base in the former coal mining area of the Pas-de-Calais. Her aim is to expand the political influence of the FN and transform it into a big popular party. that addresses itself not only to the electorate on the right but to all the French people. She has at numerous times distanced herself from some of Jean-Marie Le Pen's controversial statements. Internal campaign for the FN leadership, 2010-11. Her candidacy was endorsed by an overwhelming majority of senior executives. She spent 4 months campaigning for the FN leadership, holding meetings with FN members in 51 departments to explain in detail her political views and projects for the party. On the 3rd of September 2010, she launched her internal campaign at Cours VAR. Most of her campaign tours throughout France were reported in local newspapers and regional television programs. In December 2010 and early January 2011, FN members voted by post to elect their new president and the 100 members of the Central Committee. The party held its Congress at Tours for 2 days, and Jean-Marie Le Pen became de facto its honorary chairman. Her challenger Bruno Gollnisch polled 35%. Controversy. For those who want to talk a lot about World War II, if it's about occupation, then we could also talk about it. Muslim prayers in the streets. Because that is occupation of territory. It is an occupation of sections of the territory, of districts in which religious laws apply. There are of course no tanks. There are no soldiers. But it is nevertheless an occupation and it weighs heavily on local residents. The mention of World War II brought claims from the media and politicians that she had drawn an irresponsible parallel with the Nazi occupation of France. A member of the FN's executive committee, Louis Saliot, denounced the attempted manipulation of opinion by communitarian groups and those really responsible for the current situation in France. On the 15th of December 2015, the Lyon court acquitted her of inciting hatred, considering that her statement did not target all of the Muslim community and was protected as a part of freedom of expression. Media rise. National media. Her various appearances on television and radio have played an important role in her political rise at national and local levels. Her political personality regularly attracts the attention of the French media. On the 5th of May 2002, after the runoff in the 2002 presidential election, she took part in a televised debate on France 3. Political analysts compared her appearance to a media baptism and claimed that her political emergence has its roots in this debate. During the program Mots Croisés crossed words on France 2 on the 5th of October 2009. Hosted on France 2 by journalist and commentator Arlette Chabot. Vous de juger, you be the judge, was one of France's foremost political programs. For her first appearance as a guest debater on the 14th of January 2010, Marine Le Pen opposed Eric Besson, then Minister of Immigration, Integration, National Identity and Mutually Supportive Development. For her first appearance as a main guest on the 9th of December 2010, she was successively questioned on economic, societal and immigration matters by Arlette Chabot and political commentator Hollande, then debated with the socialist mayor of Évry Manuel Valls, and finally was matched against Rachida Dati, former Minister of Justice. In December 2010, French journalist Guillaume Tabrad described her as the revelation of the year. He further described her as, first an electoral phenomenon, and a media phenomenon after. Hosted on France 2 by journalist and anchorman David Pujadas. Des paroles et des actes. Words and acts. Replaced. Vous de juger. For her first appearance as a main guest on the 23rd of June 2011, Le Pen opposed Cécile Duflot, National Secretary of the Greens. Hosted on TF1 by anchorwoman Laurence Ferrari and political commentator François Bacci. Parole direct, direct speech, is one of France's foremost political programs. for her first appearance as a sole guest on the 15th of September 2011. Le Pen attracted an average of 6 million viewers with a peak of 7.3 million in the second half of the program. International media. At an international level, she was invited by the Quebec web radio Rocket in December 2008. On the 4th of April 2011, she appeared for the first time as a candidate in the 2011 Time 100 poll. In October 2011, she presented her book in Verona, Italy and met Assunta Almirante, the widow of the far-right MSI leader Giorgio Almirante. The logo of the Front National was inspired by MSI logo. In February 2013, she spoke at the Cambridge Union Society, the University of Cambridge's debating society. Her appearance sparked controversy, with anti-fascist group Unite Against Fascism opposing her invitation on a no-platform basis and organizing a demonstration of about 200 people outside the venue. Supported her right to freedom of expression. President of the FN. The demonization of the FN. From a general point of view, Marine Le Pen is often judged more moderate than her father. A part of the French electorate considers her positions more nuanced, polished and detoxified than Jean-Marie Le Pen's provocations. Her smiling, calm image contrasts with much of the stereotypes generally attributed to her political family. For example, Bernard-Henri Léaud, a strong opponent of the FN, talked about the far right with a human face. In a 2010 RTL interview, Le Pen stated that her strategy was not about changing the FN's program but about showing it as it really is, instead of the image given to it by the media in the previous decades. The media and her political adversaries are accused of spreading an unfair, wrong and caricatural image of the National Front. She refuses the qualification of far-right or extreme right, considering it a pejorative term. How am I party of the extreme right? I don't think that our propositions are extreme propositions, whatever the subject. In 2014, the American magazine Foreign Policy mentioned her, along with 4 other Frenchmen, in its list of the 100 global thinkers of the year, underlining the way she renovated the image of her party, which had become a model for other right-wing parties in Europe after her success in the European elections. For a long time, she has been reluctant to endorse Donald Trump, while other European populists have already embraced his candidacy, and only supported him by saying, "For France, anything is better than Hillary Clinton." However, on the 8th of November 2016 she posted a tweet congratulating Trump on his presidential victory. Her social program and her support of Syriza in the 2015 Greek general elections have led Nicolas Sarkozy to declare her a far-left politician sharing some of Jean-Luc Mélenchon's propositions. President François Hollande said she was talking like a leaflet of the Communist Party. Eric Zemmour, journalist for the conservative newspaper Le Figaro, wrote during the 2012 presidential election that the FN had become a left-wing party under the influence of Florian Philippot. She has also relaxed some political positions of the party, advocating for civil unions for same-sex couples instead of her party's previous opposition to legal recognition of same-sex partnerships, accepting unconditional abortion and withdrawing the death penalty from her platform. First steps as a new leader, 2011. As a president of the Front National, Marine Le Pen currently sits as an ex officio member among the FN Executive Office. During her opening speech in Tours on the 16th of January 2011, she advocated to restore the political framework of the national community and to implement the direct democracy which enables the civic responsibility and the collective tie, thanks to the participation of public-spirited citizens for the decisions. The predominant political theme was the uncompromising defense of a protective and efficient state. which favors secularism, prosperity and liberties. She also denounced the Europe of Brussels, which everywhere imposed the destructive principles of ultraliberalism and free trade, at the expense of public utilities, employment, social equity and even our economic growth, which became within 20 years the weakest of the world. After the traditional Joan of Arc and Labor Day march in Paris on the 1st of May 2011, she gave her first speech in front of 3,000 supporters. On 10 and the 11th of September 2011, she made her political comeback with the title, The Voice of People, the Spirit of France, in the Convention Center of Acropolis in Nice. During a demonstration held in front of the Senate on the 8th of December 2011, she expressed during a speech her firm and absolute opposition to the right of foreigners to vote. She regularly holds thematic press conferences on varied issues in French, European and international politics. First presidential candidacy, 2011-12. Marine Le Pen sings La Marseillaise at the conclusion of the presentation of her presidential project held in Paris on the 19th of November 2011. Marine Le Pen stood in the 2012 French presidential election on the 16th of May 2011. Her presidential candidacy was unanimously validated by the FN Executive Committee on the 19th of November 2011. She presented in Paris the main thematic issues of her presidential project: sovereign people and democracy, Europe, reindustrialization and strong state, family and education, immigration and assimilation versus communitarianism, geopolitics and international politics. Many observers have noticed her tendency to enhance economical and social subjects such as globalization and delocalizations, instead of immigration or law and order, which have been the paramount platform of the FN in the previous decades. On the 11th of December 2011, she held her first presidential meeting in Metz. On the 13th of March 2012, she publicly announced that she had the 500 necessary signatures to take part in the presidential election. On the 22nd of April 2012, she polled 17.90% in the first round and finished in third position behind François Hollande and incumbent President Nicolas Sarkozy. First round results. Candidates with the most votes by departments: mainland France, overseas and French citizens living abroad. Marine Le Pen came first in Gard. She was in ahead in Gard, whereas Sarkozy and Hollande respectively polled 24.86% and 24.11%. She achieved her highest regional result in Picardy. In addition to Picardy, she also polled over 20% in 10 other regions, Corsica. First round results. Candidates with the most votes by municipalities in metropolitan France. Dark gray. Marine Le Pen. She achieved her lowest regional result in Île-de-France. In addition to Île-de-France, she polled less 15% in Brittany. A French sociologist, Sylvain Crépon, who analyzed the social and occupational groups of the FN voters in 2012, explained, "The FN vote is made up of the victims of globalization. It is the small shopkeepers who are going under because of the economic crisis and competition from the out-of-town hypermarkets. It is low-paid workers from the private sector, the unemployed. The FN scores well among people living in poverty, who have a real fear about how to make ends meet." Quote, during a speech delivered in Paris on the 1st of May 2012 after the traditional Joan of Arc and Labor Day march, she has refused to back either incumbent President Sarkozy or Socialist Hollande in the runoff on the 6th of May. Addressing the party's annual rally at Place de l'Opéra, she vowed to cast a blank ballot and told her supporters to vote with their conscience, saying, "Hollande and Sarkozy? Neither of them will save you. On Sunday I will cast a blank protest vote. I have made my choice. Each of you will make yours." Accusing both candidates of surrendering to Europe and financial markets, she asked, who between François Hollande and Nicolas Sarkozy will impose the austerity plan in the most servile way, who will submit the best to the instructions of the IMF, the ECB or the European Commission. Quote, Electoral progression, 2012-16. In the wake of her success, she announced the foundation of the Blue Marine Gathering, an electoral coalition dedicated to the June parliamentary elections. Herself a candidate in the Pas-de-Calais 11th constituency, she collected 42.36% of the vote, far before the socialist representative Philippe Kemmel and her far-left rival Jean-Luc Mélenchon. She was beaten in the second round with 49.86%. She filed an appeal rejected by the Constitutional Council, which however recognized some proven deceptions. Nationally, her party has only elected 2 lawmakers, her niece Marion Maréchal-Le Pen and Gilbert Collard. In 2014, she led her party to other success in the municipal and senatorial elections. 11 mayors and 2 senators were elected. It was the first time the National Front entered in France's upper chamber. On the 24th of May 2014, the National Front won the European election in France with 24.90% of the vote. Marine Le Pen came in first place in her Northwest constituency with a score of 33.60%. 25 FN members were sent at the European Parliament of Strasbourg. They voted against the Juncker Commission in July. 1 year later, she was able to announce the formation of a group composed of the French National Front, the Freedom Party of Austria, the Italian Lega Nord, the Dutch Party for Freedom, the Polish Congress of the New Right, the Flemish Vlaams-Belang and former UKIP member Janice Atkinson. Her first attempt to constitute this group in 2014 has failed because of the UKIP refusal and of controversial statements of her father Jean-Marie Le Pen in June. Le Pen sat in the Commission for International Trade. In 2016, Politico have ranked her second as the most influential MEP after Martin Schulz. In April 2015, her father provoked a political crisis in the National Front because of 2 interviews he gave. Some controversial statements include his opinion on World War II and on minorities in France. Marine Le Pen organized a postal vote to ask the FN members to change the statutes of the party in order to expel her father. Le Pen pursued his movement, and the justice cancelled the vote. On the 25th of August, the FN Executive Office voted his exclusion from the party he has founded 40 years earlier. Many observers have concluded on her dependence toward her closest advisor, Florian Philippot, a former left-wing technocrat. A national purge excluded the members, refusing the evolution of the FN under Marine Le Pen's leadership. She tardily announced her candidacy for the presidency of the Regional Council of Nord-Pas-de-Calais-Picardy for the 2015 regional elections. She have regretted the proximity with the next presidential election. On the 6th of December, she arrived first with 46% of the vote, but the socialist candidate, third with 18.12%, has withdrawn and called to vote for her right-wing opponent Xavier Bertrand, who won by 57.80% of the vote. Her niece Marion also lost but got a better score than her second presidential candidacy, 2016-17. Accepting the candidates for the center-right primary, Marine Le Pen was the first to announce her candidacy for the 2017 French presidential election on the 8th of April 2016. She has consistently maintained high popularity in polling figures. She is predicted to gather between 28% and 30% in the first round, which is close to the figures predicted for frontrunner François Fillon. She has appointed David Rachline, a young FN member of the Senate, as her campaign manager. The FN had difficulties finding funding because of the opposition of every French bank to her political platform. This led to the National Front borrowing $9 million from the first Czech-Russian bank in Moscow in 2014. Even as the EU placed sanctions on Russia for annexing Crimea. In February 2016, the FN asked Russia for another loan, this time in the amount of $27 million. The loan has not materialized. Most political analysts notice her strong position because of the absence of a primary in her party, consolidating her leadership. Of the news such as the migrants crisis or the terrorist attacks in France, reinforcing her political positions, and of the very right-wing campaign of Nicolas Sarkozy in the Republican primary, enlarging her themes. In a 2016 interview with the BBC, Le Pen stated that Donald Trump's presidential victory will in fact help her in the 2016-2017 presidential race. In her opinion, Mr. Trump has made possible what had previously been presented as impossible. However, she stated she would not officially launch her campaign before February 2017, waiting for the results of the Republican and Socialist primaries, and preferred to remain silent in the media and usher thematic think tanks dedicated to the elaboration of her program. In consequence, her rare media appearances attract consistent audiences. The communication of her party also attracts media attention. A new meter-on-inspired poster showing her in a rural landscape with the slogan, "Appeased France," is an attempt to respond to surveys indicating she remains somewhat controversial for an important part of the French electorate. But the mockeries sparked by this poster led to a change of slogan, "In the name of the people." Others have noticed the disappearance of the FN logo and of the name Le Pen on the campaign's posters. She officially launched her candidacy on 4 and 5 February 2017 in Lyon, while she is predicted to be the frontrunner with 25% of the votes. Explaining the national and international attention she attracted, Le Pen promised a referendum in which the nation would decide whether to withdraw from the European Union if she could not achieve France's territorial, monetary, economical and legislative sovereignties in a 6-month renegotiation with the EU. Her first appearance on TV 4 days later generated the highest viewing figures of France too since the previous presidential election. On the 2nd of March 2017, the European Parliament voted to revoke Le Pen's immunity from prosecution for tweeting violent imagery. Le Pen had tweeted an image of beheaded journalist James Foley in December 2015. She took down the tweet following a request from Foley's family. In an unrelated case, Le Pen faces prosecution for allegedly spending European Union Parliament funds on her own political party. The lifting of her immunity from prosecution does not apply to the ongoing investigation into the misuse of parliamentary funds by the FN. For the first time, Le Pen met with several incumbent heads of state including Libyan's Michel Aoun, Tchad's Idriss Déby by in Russia Vladimir Putin, after 2 secret meetings in 2014 and 2015 with the last one. Political positions. Economy. Marine Le Pen contends that the FN's immigration program is better known among the voters. She thus concentrates on the party's economic and social program. On the 17th of October 2011, in front of the French Dexia headquarters in La Défense, Marine Le Pen holds a press conference about the systemic banking crisis. Opposed to free trade and autarky, she advocates protectionism as a median way. In her view, if one considers the economy to be a raging river, then free trade is like allowing the torrent to rush along unchecked. Autarky equates to the erection of a dam, whereas protectionism is to install a sluice gate. Protectionism is not autarky. Our position is not extreme, as our opponents would have it believed, but one which favors the middle way. In 2010, she vigorously criticized the pension plan drawn up by Nicolas Sarkozy and his liberal conservative government. She paid tribute to the economist Maréchal-Le, who died on the 9th of October 2010. She favors the repeal of the 1973 Pompidou-Giscard law, which makes it illegal for France to borrow at zero or a low rate of interest from the bank. France enforces the country to borrow at higher rate on the international financial markets. In her view, the national debt has grown steeply because of this law. She claimed that in 2010 France had already refunded 355 trillion euros of accrued interest on loans at a time when the national debt represented around 650 trillion euros. She has expressed support for the French public utilities, the civil servants, and the general public interest. During a press conference in June 2011, she advocated to reintroduce the Havana Charter and implement an international trade organization in place of World Trade Organization, in order to reorganize the World Trade Exchanges. During her speech at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., in November 2011, she proposed 3 essential solutions to stop the current world systemic crisis and turn the world towards a greater justice and greater prosperity. Reintroduction of a polymetallic standard in the international monetary systems as a world standard of reference and exchanges in order to establish a free monetary system, and struggle against speculation. The ratification of the modernized Havana Charter by the 1948 signatory nations and incoming emerging countries, in order to favor a reasonable protectionism that encourages cooperation in trade among nations, through the end of unbridled free trade. Application of the 1933 Glass-Steagall Act, which legally separated investment banking and commercial banking. 2. The banking system of each country. In October 2011, she advocated to implement a drastic regulation of the banking sector, separating by law the deposit banks from the merchant banks. She claimed that the deposit banks should be rescued by a temporary and partial nationalization. In her view, the balance sheet of the banks should be the object of a transparency operation. In October 2011, she suggested 7 measures to save $30 billion per year in order to preserve France's AAA credit rating. The largest part of the measures are made up of avoiding fraud on welfare payments and avoidance of tax loopholes. Together, 18.5 billion. Stopping not useful local spending. 4 billion. As well as stopping payments of France to the EU. 7 billion. A president of the Mouvement des Entreprises de France, MEDEF, Laurence Parisot, regularly levels strong criticism at the FN's economic and social program. Agriculture and environment. In her view, the Common Agricultural Policy, CAP, after 2013 will be unable to protect our farmers from speculators and savage global competition, or to compensate for the excesses of the multinationals of the food processing industry and large-scale distributors. The CAP after 2013 will remain wedged between the ultra-liberal and internationalist market logic of the European Commission and a future green CAP, in reality serving the neo-capitalists of ecological business. During her first visits at the Paris International Agricultural Show on the 25th of February 2011, she claims that internationalist organizations such as the EU, FAO, United Nations and G20 are directly responsible for the food crises throughout the world. She advocates France's food independence with regard to multinationals. She advocates the implementation of the autarky of big spaces and an economy in concentric circles. In her view, it is an ecological heresy to consume products grown at 20,000 km away and recycle waste thousands km further. She claims that we should produce to the closest, distribute on the spot, consume as a priority products of its region, and then in the nearby region if not produced on the spot. She seeks to implement contracts of cooperation if necessary. Goods like coffee are not produced in Europe. Energy and transport. Marine Le Pen regularly denounces sharp rises in energy prices. She advocates an immediate reduction of 20% of the domestic tax on oil products. Tip: a surcharge of fantastic profits of the largest gas and oil companies and a struggle against international speculation on basic products such as food and energy. After a fatal event occurred on the 12th of September 2011 in the Centrico nuclear installation located on the Maréchal nuclear site, she claimed that this accident illustrated the dangerousness of this energy and the necessity to consider a progressive and well-thought-out exit from nuclear power. In her view, the state must secure the 58 French nuclear power plants and invest in researches to process nuclear waste. She advocates to start the energy diversification of France, in particular with an ambitious program of research into hydrogen. Taxation. Marine Le Pen denounces the current corporate tax as a crying injustice. She claims that the main groups of CAC 40 only pay 8% of corporate tax, whereas the small offices, home offices, the small and medium enterprises, the craftsmen and the shopkeepers fully pay 33%. She advocates to implement a flexible corporate tax according to the use of profits, heavier when the profits benefit the shareholders and lighter when the profits turn towards profit sharing, salaries, employment and productive investment, enabling a relocation of activities. European Union and globalization. As MEP, she holds globalization, intergovernmental organizations, Euromondialism, free trade and ultraliberalism responsible for the decline of agriculture. She opposes the establishment of a direct European tax, which is favored by the leaders of the European Parliament and European Commission. She claims that an indirect European tax already exists, since France is a net annual contributor to the EU budget by up to €7 billion annually. She claims that the Treaty of Lisbon is the raw vigor of the independence and identity of the European nations and the executioner of public utilities in the name of a cult of profitability and free competition, both mortal enemies of public interest. Opposed to the accession of Turkey to the European Union, she prefers the option of a privileged partnership. Euro and Eurozone. She claims that the implementation of the euro entailed a rise in prices and its abandonment would lead to an increase in purchasing power. In order to recover monetary sovereignty, she advocates that France should gradually leave the euro with a new conversion rate fixed to €1 equals 1 franc. In her view, France should jointly negotiate a group departure from the euro and eurozone. This departure should take effect on the same day and include the other European countries, such as Ireland, Greece, Italy, Spain, Portugal, Belgium, which are suffering because of the single currency. She explains the tenet and the mechanism of a competitive devaluation J-curve. She anticipates a total economic federalization of the Eurozone. In her view, this option, which is favored by the European techno-structure, presents all the features of a totalitarian utopia. She claims that a monstrous superstructure, already named European Ministry of Finance, would decide in the opaqueness our policies of education, health and security. In her view, the federal headlong rush also supposes a massive financial transfer of our countries towards Southern and Eastern Europe, at the detriment of the most vulnerable French people. About successive bailout plans, she laments that the contributing countries, France in particular, throw in the whole of the European debt billions which dig their deficits and come them closer to the eye of the cyclone. She asserts that despite the expansion of the abilities of the European Financial Stability Facility, reassuring announcements and new austerity plans. Greece is sinking. Social devastation is intensifying and the anger of the people bursts out. Geopolitics and intergovernmental organizations. She pledged to pull France out of NATO, saying that the National Front has from day one been opposed to NATO membership. In her view, France has also to revise its geostrategic relations with the USA. In May 2011, she claimed that the old institutions, such as World Trade Organization, World Bank and International Monetary Fund were expired. In 2011, she advocated the replacement of WTO by an international trade organization, founded on the same principles of protection, interest of people and support to small and medium enterprises, the humbles faced with the powerful and cartels. In her view, IMF, which has become an infernal machine at the service of the ultraliberal ideology, is in its current form an extremely harmful institution. She claims that the structural adjustment plans that IMF imposes on countries where it operates systematically result in privatization of public utilities, dismantling of the state, drop in salaries and pensions, and removal of protections at boundaries. In her view, citizens are always the first victims of IMF, like in Argentina in 2001 and today in Greece. She claims that the in-depth results of IMF are disastrous. Rise in debts and sharp increase in rhythm of financial crises for 2 decades. She consequently advocates the abolition of IMF. Immigration. Illegal immigration. Marine Le Pen advocates to vote for the abolition of the law enabling the regularization of the illegal immigrants. In her view, this measure corresponds with the interest of France, the respect of its authority and the most elementary justice. In July 2011, she wrote an open letter to policemen, gendarmes and customs officers concerning the policy of the fight against illegal immigration. She favors a radical change of politics in order to drastically reduce upstream the influx of illegal immigrants towards France. In her view, this policy requires to cut the suction pumps of illegal immigration while France is in this field one of the most incentive countries in the world. In February 2011, she claimed that in the wake of the Arab Spring, Europe and particularly France would be confronted with a surge in illegal immigration. She denounced the EU's tragic helplessness to respond to this new migratory challenge, and the EU's inability to face these emergency situations and to control effectively the migratory flows. Accompanied by the Vice President of the FN Luis Eliot and Mario Borghezio MEP, Lega Nord, she traveled to Lampedusa on the 14th of March 2011. In order to curb the illegal immigration influx from Tunisia and Libya, she has enjoined Nicolas Sarkozy to announce France's immediate and definitive withdrawal from Schengen area and to reinstate urgently customs controls in all the borders of the country. She claimed that the government's deceptive announcements about Schengen issue aimed at concealing its political inactivity and attempting to cheat public opinion. Legal immigration. Marine Le Pen seeks to establish a moratorium on legal immigration. On the 28th of November 2010, 52.9% of the Swiss voters and 15.5% cantons approved the popular initiative for the deportation of criminal foreigners, while the governmental counter-proposal was rejected by 54.2% of voters and all the 20.6% cantons. She praised the great victory of the Swiss people against the ruling elite. Interviewed by the Daily Telegraph, she praised David Cameron's pledge to cut net annual immigration to UK from around 200,000 to tens of thousands. Citizenship and nationality. In Le Pen's view, citizenship is indivisible from nationality and rests on the equality of all people before the law. The latter should preclude preferential treatment based on the membership of a social, ethnic or religious category. She has said that filiation should be the normal route to French nationality, with naturalization the exception. She favors an enforcement of the law regarding loss of nationality, communitarianism and secularism, advocating that the FN remains a non-denominational party. Marine Le Pen regularly states her attachment to secularism, laïcité, in French society. She favors a ban on any communitarian or religious demands in schools, and seeks an amendment to the constitution stating that the French Republic does not recognize any community, denominations and ethnic groups. On the 29th of November 2009, 57.5% of Swiss voters and 19 cantons approved the popular initiative for a ban on the construction of new minarets, without retroactive effect on the 4 minarets already built in Switzerland. She congratulated the Swiss people on the overwhelming approval of the ban and denounced the ruling elite for its contempt of direct democracy. In February 2010, the fast food chain Quick announced that 8 of its franchises would offer exclusively halal meals. This decision immediately triggered a controversy among the French political class from the Socialist Party, the UMP, Liana Luca MP, and the FN. Interviewed by Radio 1 in June 2011, she said that unlike the leader of the PVV Geert Wilders, she is not waging war against Islam and is fighting the Islamization of French society. Emphasizing her divergence with the Dutch MP, she claimed, "That's the difference between Geert Wilders and me. He reads the QUR, and literally, you can interpret the QUR, and, or indeed the Bible, ? Literally, I resist fundamentalists who want to impose their will and law on France. Sharia law is not compatible with our principles. Our values are democracy." Quote. Social issues. Marine Le Pen supports keeping abortion legal, and opposes efforts to abolish public subsidies for abortion. However, she believes that abortion is a serious moral issue that is too often regarded as trivial by French culture. Le Pen opposes the repeal of the 1975 Veil Law, LOI Veil, which framed abortion in a restrictive legislative provision. She claims that an unfavorable socio-economic background is a determining factor for the majority of women who have undergone an abortion. Consequently, she advocates a strongly pro-family policy more conducive to the nurturing and raising of children, favorable to a policy aimed at increasing the birth rate. She explains her views on abortion in her autobiography, Contraflots. She supported a referendum on whether to reinstate capital punishment in France, which was abolished in 1981. National politics and overseas. On the 70th anniversary of the appeal of the 18th of June, Marine Le Pen held a press conference at the FN's headquarters, drawing a parallel with the fall of France in June 1940. She denounced the weakening of the nation-state, German domination within the EU and subservience to Atlanticism. Her goal was to become the personification of national ambition and to return to France a spirit of greatness and an awareness of its place in history. She remains committed to France's territorial sovereignty, including the overseas departments and territories. During a debate on Radio Cité Genève with Eric Bertinot, an SVP member of the Grand Council of Geneva, she vigorously opposed his proposal that the French departments of Ain and Haute-Savoie be incorporated into Switzerland. During her opening speech, she reminded that France is present in 3 oceans and possesses the second-largest exclusive economic zone in the world, covering 11 million square kilometers. In April 2011, she wrote a letter to all the prefects of France. Mayotte. In a referendum on becoming an overseas department held on the 29th of March 2009, 95.22% of the Mahoran voters approved the change of status. an overseas collectivity from 2003. Mayotte became France's 101st department on the 31st of March 2011. A third of the population of Mayotte are illegal migrants, mostly from the nearby islands of the archipelago which make up the independent Comoran state. New Caledonia. Reasserting her unshakable attachment to French Caledonia, she stated that New Caledonia is in France and must stay there. In her view, the creation of a citizenship and an acknowledgement of a economic identity organize a true dismemberment of the sovereignty and a breach of the unity of the French Republic. In June 2010, she claimed that the official acknowledgement of the flag of the separatists of FNLKS as emblem of New Caledonia would constitute an affront to France and would show the true will of the government to get rid of this French territory. International politics. Europe. She had described the Front National as a patriotic party with more in common with the United Kingdom Independence Party, UKIP, and its opposition to the totalitarian character of the EU and its desire to remove people's sovereignty, than with the British National Party, BNP. On the 8th of June 2011, Marine Le Pen and the leader of the Freedom Party of Austria, Heinz Christian Strache, held in the European Parliament a joint press conference about globalization, migration and economic threats in the EU. In a statement written on the 20th of July 2011, she wrote that, if Belgium is going to split, if Flanders pronounces its independence, which seems more and more credible a possibility, the French Republic would do well to welcome Wallonia to its heart. She said that, on this eve of the Belgian National Day, it is nevertheless the responsibility of France and the French to extend a hand to the Walloons, and that the historic and fraternal links that unite our two people are too strong for France to abandon the Walloons. She suggested any such plan to become part of France should be agreed by a referendum in both countries. In a statement about the 2011 Norway attacks, she reiterated her condolences to the Norwegian people and recalled her determination to fight mercilessly against all forms of violence and barbarity. In reply to AMRAP's statement, she claimed that the Norwegian slaughter was the work of a lone lunatic who must be ruthlessly punished. In October 2011, after her resignation from the Alliance of European National Movements, AENM, she joined the European Alliance for Freedom, EAF, a pan-European sovereigntist platform created in late 2010. Russia's and Ukraine. She advocates forging a privileged partnership with Russia. She has said that a French-Russian partnership is necessitated by obvious civilization and geostrategic factors, as well as France's energy security interests. In her view, France's interests are in Europe, but in Great Europe, especially including its partnership with Russia. The National Front considers that Ukraine has been subjugated by the United States through the Ukrainian crisis. The National Front denounces anti-Russian sentiment in Eastern Europe and the submission of Western Europe to NATO's interests in the region. North Africa, Middle East and Asia. In October 2011, she denounced a violence wave in Tunisia and numerous deadly attacks perpetrated against the Coptic minority in Egypt. She claimed that the revolutions in Maghreb, which have been led in the name of freedom and human rights, turned into a democratic fiasco and the eruption of violent Islamist movements. In her view, these violent attacks illustrate the extreme fragility of the democratic processes in countries faced with the growing influence of radical Islamist movements and the threats that hang over individual freedom. She also expressed deepest concern faced with the possibility of seeing the surge Islamist dictatorship on Europe's doorstep. About the situation in Libya, she claimed that the confrontations pertained to a civil war in which France's interest was not to interfere. She regretted the haste of the French diplomacy, which had prematurely recognized the National Transitional Council, which spoke in the name of the Libyan rebels. She claimed that the transfer of the U.S. command towards NATO increased the submissiveness of the French armed forces, denouncing the U.S. supremacy in the military intervention. She refused the idea that France slavishly followed the USA in this new stalemate. Interviewed by the Israeli daily newspaper Haaretz about the fact that some of her European senior colleagues had formed alliances with, and visited, some Israeli settlers and groups, Marine Le Pen said, "The shared concern about radical Islam explains the relationship. But it is possible that behind it is also the need of the visitors from Europe to change their image in their countries. As far as their partners in Israel are concerned, I myself don't understand the idea of continuing to develop the settlements. I consider it a political mistake and would like to make it clear in this context that we must have the right to criticize the policy of the State of Israel. Just as we are allowed to criticize any sovereign country, without it being considered anti-Semitism. After all, the National Front has always been Zionistic and always defended Israel's right to exist. She has opposed the immigration of French Jews to Israel in response to radical Islam, explaining, "The Jews of France are Frenchmen. They're at home here, and they must stay here and not emigrate. The country is obligated to provide solutions to the development of radical Islam in the problematic regions." In a statement about the death of Osama bin Laden, she welcomed his salutary elimination and said that his execution was a right and appropriate answer to the death of the victims in the 2011 Marrakech bombing. Africa. Marine Le Pen claims that with the help or the protection of Western major powers, including France in front row, Africa became for the decolonization the privileged ground of all the lobbies which maintain on its territory unacceptable, criminal and neo-colonialist networks of corruption. She stated that only diplomacy, negotiation and consultation were able to settle the tangle of the 2010-2011 Ivorian crisis, which had begun in the aftermath of the runoff of the 2010 presidential election, when both Laurent Gbagbo and Alassane Ouattara have claimed victory and taken the presidential oath of office. Interviewed in January 2011 by the monthly Pan-African magazine Premier Line, she denounced the interference of France and the international community in internal politics of Côte d'Ivoire and criticized Nicolas Sarkozy's support for Alassane Ouattara as a political mistake, denouncing a double-standards diplomacy. She said that the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, is not legitimate to decide a military intervention in Côte d'Ivoire since it had not intervened in Niger after the coup d'état led by Salou Djibo on the 18th of February 2010. In parliamentary questions addressed to the European Commission on the 12th of September 2011, she strongly criticized that Rwandan President Paul Kagame be received by Nicolas Sarkozy. She said, welcoming Kagame, whose regime is accused in a United Nations report of crimes against humanity, against civilian populations in Democratic Republic of the Congo. Sarkozy once more demonstrated his contempt for law and justice. She also claimed that, accepting to receive Kagame in Paris, he sullied the reputation of the French army, outrageously accused by Kigali of having taken part in the Rwandan genocide. Elections. European elections. Northwest France in 2009. Attaining the best result among the 7 FN European lists, her list polled 10.18%. Her list achieved its highest regional result in Picardy, Île-de-France in 2004. In the 2004 election, she led the FN list in the Île-de-France's constituency. Her list polled 58%, and only won one of the 14 seats of MEP. Parliamentary elections. Paris in 1993. At the age of 24, she was for the first time a parliamentary candidate in the Paris 16th constituency, whereas Bernard Pons was re-elected as MP with 63.14% in the first round. She arrived in third position with 11.10% behind the socialist candidate Lens in 2002. In the 2002 election, she was a candidate at Lens in the Pas-de-Calais 13th constituency. There are many workers and unemployed people in this economically deprived constituency, one of the socialist strongholds in northern France. She polled 24% in the first round and achieved 30% in the runoff, whereas her socialist challenger Jean-Claude Bois polled 20% in the first round and was re-elected as MP with 70% in the runoff. Hénin-Beaumont in 2007. In the 2007 election, Marine Le Pen and her substitute Steve Brewa, who emphasized the importance of local politics, represented the FN at Hénin-Beaumont in the Pas-de-Calais 14th constituency. Located in the former coal mining area, this constituency is characterized by a higher level of unemployment than the national average. A significant number of citizens in recipient of welfare such as the Revenue Minimum Insertion (RMI), and the closure of important factories like Metallurg North with the loss of 870 jobs. A few months previously, Steve Brewa had asked her to contest this constituency, one of the socialist strongholds in northern France. Explaining the choice of this area, she declared that the constituency was symbolic, with unemployment, offshoring and insecurity representing the major problems of France. Asserting his disappointment with the incumbent socialist MP Albert Facon, Daniel Janssens, who had been a socialist activist for 30 years and a first deputy mayor of La Forest for 24 years, led her support committee during the electoral campaign. Among the 14 candidates running in the first round, she came second with 24.47%, whereas Facon came top with 28.24%. In the runoff, she achieved 41.65%, winning 17.18% and 6,514 votes within a week, whereas Albert Facon was re-elected as MP with 58.35%. According to political analysts, she confirmed her excellent showing in this economically deprived area, achieving a very high percentage of votes thanks to economic and social matters like deindustrialization, unemployment, and a feeling of abandonment rather than issues such as immigration and insecurity. Hénin-Beaumont in 2012. Marine Le Pen represented as the FN leader at Pas-de-Calais 11th constituency, where the new constitution regrouped. Hénin-Beaumont had her best score in the presidential election. She was defeated in the second round by Philippe Kemmel of the Socialist Party. Convicted for fraud. In 2014, the Criminal Court of Bethune found Marine Le Pen guilty of fraud and sentenced her €10,000 fine for producing and distributing flyers purporting to be from electoral opponent Jean-Luc Mélenchon in the 2012 election. In a statement, her counsel Wallerin de Saint-Just announced that she was appealing the conviction. Regional elections. Nord-Pas-de-Calais in 2010. In the 2010 elections, Marine Le Pen led the FN regional list in Nord-Pas-de-Calais and the departmental list in Pas-de-Calais, whereas Steve Brewa figured in second position. In the first round, her list polled 18.31% and arrived in third position in Nord-Pas-de-Calais. In order to take part in the runoff, a regional list must cross the minimal threshold of 10% of the valid votes. In the runoff, her list polled 22.20% and arrived in third position in Nord-Pas-de-Calais. Thanks to her political success, she confirmed her regional presence and reinforced her internal position within the FN. As a member of the Standing Committee and a president of the regional group, Front National, gathering for the Nord-Pas-de-Calais, she led a resolute opposition facing the left-wing regional executive managed by Daniel Percheron. Île-de-France in 2004. In the 2004 elections, she led the FN regional list in Île-de-France and the departmental list in Hauts-de-Seine. Her list polled 12.26% in the first round and achieved 10.11% with 15 councillors elected in the runoff. She exercised the leadership of her regional group for 5 years and left it in February 2009, since she preferred to devote her energy to the European election campaign in the Northwest France's constituency. A member of the Standing Committee, she led a strong opposition facing the left-wing regional executive managed by Jean-Paul Hutchin. Nord-Pas-de-Calais in 1998. In the 1998 elections, she figured on the FN list in Nord-Pas-de-Calais and was a regional councillor for 6 years. Municipal elections. Marine Le Pen and Steve Briouat holding a press conference at Hénin-Beaumont, Pas-de-Calais, for the launch of the 2008 municipal election. Hénin-Beaumont in 2008. Since 2001, Gérard Dallencheville has been the mayor of Hénin-Beaumont, an economically deprived town in a former coal mining area. A municipal councillor since 1995. In order to take part in the runoff, a municipal list must cross the minimal threshold of 10% of the votes cast. Despite their electoral failure, Steve Briouat and Marine Le Pen led a sharp opposition against the re-elected mayor Gérard Dallencheville, his first vice-mayor Marion, LLE lineman and their left-wing team. 2009 Hénin-Beaumont by-election. A municipal by-election was held in Hénin-Beaumont on the 28th of June and the 5th of July 2009. Like in 2008, Steve Briouat was the FN top candidate whereas she figured in second position. The FN list was largely in the lead with 39.33% in the first round and achieved 47.62% with 8 councillors elected in the runoff. Steve Briouat, Marine Le Pen and the 6 other FN councillors led the sole political opposition against the new mayor Daniel Decaene and his successor Eugene Bénès. On the 24th of February 2011, she resigned as a municipal councillor because of the law on the accumulation of mandates. Cumul des mandats. Political mandates. Local mandates. Regional councillor of Nord-Pas-de-Calais. Since the 26th of March 2010. Member of the Standing Committee. Leader of the FN Group. Regional councillor of Île-de-France. Member of the Standing Committee. Leader of the FN Group until February 2009. European mandates. Member of the European Parliament and the Île-de-France constituency. Non-inscrits. Identity, tradition, sovereignty. Member. Committee on Culture and Education. Committee on Civil Liberties, Justice and Home Affairs. Delegation for Relations with Israel. Substitute. Committee on Internal Market and Consumer Protection. Delegation for Relations with Australia and New Zealand. Member. Committee on Employment and Social Affairs. Since the 16th of July 2009. Delegation to the ACP-EU Joint Parliamentary Assembly. Since the 16th of September 2009. Substitute. Committee on International Trade. Since the 16th of July 2009. Delegation for Relations with Canada.